I guess he wants to be leader. You never quit saying you wanted to be leader. That's the difference, isn't it?
Well, I quit on a matter of policy, which was the referendum. Our party had taken a particular view and wanted to campaign no, and it would have bound all of the Frontbench. And given my history on the issue, I decided that I wanted to campaign yes. I'd made that clear to Peter Dutton the December before we made the decision, and so that was my choice. And I think that's our tradition. If you want to go in our party and run your own race, you can be part of the party and do so from the backbench. But we have an important principle, it's an important Westminster principle, of cabinet and shadow cabinet solidarity.
What do you... I guess he quit for those reasons as well, or he said so. He didn't want to see a situation where he didn't have a say on immigration. Was that fair enough on his part?
Well, that's a matter for Andrew and Susan. What I will say about Andrew is that he's got a big contribution to make. He'll continue to make it, as do all of our colleagues, because what we need to do between now and the next election is to hold this government to account, to demonstrate to people that we'll provide a real alternative based on our values, and every member of Susan's team will be doing that, whether they're on the front bench or the back bench.
Well, what do you make of this email he sent out? I've watched closely as our enemies have unmasked their guns. Is that helpful to Susan Lee?
I can only suspect he's talking about the Labor Party or about ISIS or about, the enemies of Western civilisation. I'm sure that's what he's talking about.
I'm not so sure. Well, let's talk about the Middle East. Josh Frydenberger's heavily criticised Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese for suggesting the actions of Australia and other countries in recognising Palestinian statehood have made a difference here. President Trump did say to Benjamin Netanyahu, it can't be you versus the world. So did Australia have any impact, do you think?
No, I completely agree with Josh Frydenberg on this. I think every decision that the Albanese government has made in the Middle East has been wrong, and I think Penny Wong is completely wrong to claim credit here. You'll remember after the events of October 7, she called for Israel to exercise restraint before they had even fired a shot back to defend themselves. When she went to the Middle East, she refused to go down south and see the kibbutzim. She refused to meet the family of the Australian Galit Carbone who was killed. I met her brother this week, and he was still very upset about the fact the Foreign Minister had never gone to see him. It's extraordinary. Australian is killed and the Foreign Minister doesn't see them. We changed a bunch of our resolutions.
What reason was he given for that?
She couldn't fit it into her schedule. I mean, it's just an extraordinary thing to say.
Was that when he came down the other day that she couldn't fit it in?
No.
Or was there a prior time?
No, it was when she was in Israel. She would not see the family.
So she hasn't since met him or reached out to him?
The Prime Minister, to his credit, saw the brother this week.
Right.
But, when the Foreign Minister is visiting Israel, she should have gone south and seen the kibbutzim, as Alexander Downer did after the September 11 terrorist attacks. When he visited New York, he went to Ground Zero. That's exactly what the Foreign Minister should have done. She should have met with the Australian family. We passed a whole bunch of anti-Israel resolutions at the UN, changing long-standing bipartisan foreign policy. And then there was the unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state, again flushing generations of bipartisan foreign policy, putting us out of step with the United States, with New Zealand, with many members of the Pacific family, with places like Singapore and Italy. To what end? It effectively dealt Australia out of having influence over the Trump peace plan.
Do you think Donald Trump does deserve a Nobel Peace Prize for pulling this off?
I think Donald Trump's contribution in foreign policy in relation to the Middle East has been very significant. You remember in his first term, he was responsible for the Abraham Accords, which created new relationships, not just of peace, but of genuine friendship between Israel and the UAE, Morocco and Bahrain. And despite the stresses and tensions that have occurred since October 7, those friendships, those deals have held. And you remember that Donald Trump was actually, that Israel was on the cusp of making a deal with Saudi Arabia, and that is part of the reason for the October 7 terrorist attacks. So to have got Prime Minister Netanyahu to the table, to have got to a position where in the next couple of days we will see hostages released, where we will see an end to this conflict, I think Donald Trump deserves great credit.
What do you make of the fact this Palestine Action Group is still planning a protest today and wanted to go to the Opera House?
Well, I think the Supreme Court got the decision entirely correct here in terms of stopping the protest at the Opera House. And I support Troy Grant, the Shadow Police Minister in New South Wales, who's got a bill to prevent critical sites like the Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge being used for protests.
Troy Grant, isn't he? He's not still.
Sorry, not Troy Grant. The Shadow Police Minister in New South Wales has got a bill to prevent these critical sites being used. But I do wonder...
Paul Toole?
It is Paul Toole.
Okay,
I think you're correct. I'm sorry. Haven't had enough coffee this morning. It's wrong parliament for me. But I think the broader point is you have to ask why these people are still protesting, why they're not encouraging Palestinian actors to come to the table and ensure that this peace process actually concludes, because it's not just about the returning of the hostages, it's about ensuring the aid gets through, it's about ensuring an economic transition for Gaza, it's about ensuring a strong future there with an international
Do you have a
force.
view about the fact that the leaders of this protest that we see speaking publicly don't appear to be Palestinian Australians?
Well, some of them are, but some of them are just the organised hard left. And I think, we've got a real problem in this country where people are bringing foreign conflicts onto our streets again and again, week after week. And I think Australians are thoroughly sick of it.
You would have heard earlier my report on critical minerals and their importance to the US and the government strategy here to fund smelters to keep them going. Is that a smart play?
Look, the government's been talking about a critical minerals plan for months, and within, less than 2 weeks till they see the president, there's still no plan on the table. We support...
Well, there may be. We might not know about it.
The question is why don't Australians know about it? Why haven't they made the plan public? And what are the critical minerals that are on the list? Before the election, we were calling for uranium in relation to the United States to be on the list. We think it's important that in planning a critical minerals supply, that you include not only our domestic markets, but our markets of our key allies and trading partners.
Well, I think 12% of our uranium sales go to the US. The majority goes to Canada. You want to see that lifted?
Well, in relation to the critical minerals process, before the election, we suggested that uranium be on the list. Now, as you know, all of our policies since the election are up for review, but I think the government should at least consider that.
You flicked the switch to law and order this week as an opposition and asked the government to put in place mandatory sentences for having child sex abuse material, and that was after this horrific case in Victoria. What's your thinking behind this?
Look, Australians want, first and foremost, to see governments protecting children. We want children to grow up free and enjoy the innocence of childhood. And that, people who perpetrate child sex offences should do serious time. And what we've been seeing is an absolute epidemic of child sexual abuse in Australia. Australians are familiar with it, sadly, because of the issues that occurred in childcare centres in Victoria, in New South Wales, in Queensland. The Australian Centre for Countering Child Exploitation revealed that there are over 82,000 instances raised with them in the last 2 years of online child sexual abuse. That's an average of 226 incidents every single day. And then there was this Victorian case where a person was charged with 19 different occasions of child sexual abuse, 77 files, a father against their own daughter, and the daughter was saying to him, "Stop, no." And he just continued to do these things, and he got 6 months. We just think that's completely out of keeping with Australian values, and it's why we know that the mandatory minimum sentences that we introduced in government in relation to child sexual abuse have worked. We want to see those extended.
And you want
enhanced.
15 years, don't you? Is that right?
15 years is the maximum sentence here. We want 5 years
right.
For the first sentence, for the first offence, rather.
Is this one of those plays by an opposition when the heat is on in terms of your own internal struggles and you go to law and order?
No, it's not. It's something we fundamentally believe in, and we haven't played politics with this. I wrote to the Attorney-General twice in the last week, firstly to raise the issue with her and to point out the success of the existing mandatory minimums that have led to higher sentences, more guilty pleas and more rehabilitation. And secondly, I even showed her a text of the bill. It's to the government's shame that they wouldn't allow us to bring the bill on for debate.
They're not ruling out supporting it though, is that fair, or do you think they're not going to?
They haven't ruled out supporting it, and I think that is good, but they're playing politics by delaying something that we believe is urgent.
What do you make of the government's handling of the ISIS brides issue? They basically said during the week, well, the former coalition government let in actual former ISIS fighters.
Well, we brought in several orphans when we were here, and we arrested an ISIS recruiter who was here, but we were transparent all the way. We've heard different stories from the government in the last couple of weeks about this. First, the Prime Minister denied it, then Tony Burke played a series of word games. The government granted people passports in relation to this. They have played a role in bringing people back here. But more importantly, Australians want to know whereabouts are these people living, what sort of protections are being put in place to monitor them, are they going to be charged with crimes? Most Australians would not want to live anywhere near somebody who'd been an ISIS bride, who'd left this country to go and join an organisation that was dedicated to the destruction of the West. And there's particular communities here, particularly the Assyrian and Yazidi communities, that are very fearful.
Do you agree technically if they're Australian citizens they can't be allowed back in, or do you think the government should act on that?
Well, I think the government's first duty is to protect Australia and Australians. And the idea
so
that
what should they do about that? Not give them Australian passports?
Well, the government has all sorts of approaches that are open to them, including that, and it's for the government to explain why it facilitated Australian passports.
Just finally, the National Anti-Corruption Commission, it came up in estimates. Paul Brereton's consulted to the ADF 11 times since becoming Commissioner. Do you have confidence in him being Commissioner? Do you have any concerns over this issue?
I think Commissioner Brereton is doing a good job. He is widely respected as a judicial officer and as a former Army Reserve officer. I have confidence in him.
But this commission's a bit of a non-event, isn't it? I mean, we've seen very little out of it in the last 3 to 4 years.
Well, the way the Commission has been established, it's different from the New South Wales Independent Commission Against Corruption in that it doesn't have public hearings. But the main job of the Commission, as we were told repeatedly as it was coming in, was to change the culture in relation to corruption and to provide educative and investigative functions. What I want to see from commissions is convictions, not public shaming.
Julian Leeser, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.